welcome everyone to our first webinar of 2024 and for Recruiting Insight, and my special guest, Dean Cottrill from T360. Dean, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. You know, there's a lot of people in the audience, and I think we have well over 250 broker owners and leaders registered. A lot of them are going to know who you are, but some don't. And you know, we know your title, your associate partner, and EVP of brokerage and team consulting. But tell us a little bit about you and why they should listen today.
Yeah, sounds good, Mark. And thank you for having me. Real quick synopsis, 33 years now in the business. I came out of college. I grew up in Pittsburgh, got an accounting degree in college. Didn't like accounting, but when I moved down to Washington, D.C., I started buying foreclosures, 1989, 1990. This is back when snail mail was the only form of mail. And I got lists. I'd go to the courthouse. I'd do research. We'd go do auctions in the front of the house or at the courthouse steps. And I realized I wanted to get a license. So I went through, got a license, and I sold for 8 years outside of Washington, D.C. I went through GRI, CRS, became a real strong listing agent, did a great job at actually proactively going out to geographic farms, had a 5,000 home primary market that I went after on a monthly basis, so on and so forth. My daughter was born, who's now 27. And I decided I wanted a little more weekends. I was doing 6 open houses a month. You know, I had a bunch of regimented things. I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit these marks and, you know, make the money, support my family, so on and so forth. So I moved into leadership roles for 10 years. I managed offices for 2 of the largest independent brokerages in the US at the time. And I learned a lot through that process. I actually, one of the great benefits, and this is for the listeners, one of the great things is the first one was Jim Weichert's Weichert Realtors, and the second one was Long & Foster, Wes Foster's company.
Oh, Wes, that's great.
And when I went to Long & Foster's company, one of the first things they did is they put me with a consultant, a small group of managers, and it was a recruiting consultant. Someone like yourself, someone that is focused in the recruiting space. And really what ended up happening, and as I mentioned, I was a very strong listing agent, primary market, geographic farms, proactively outreaching, being able to convey value. I can communicate, I can talk, I can connect with people, you know, help lower the walls, so on and so forth for people. But in the recruiting, when I moved into management chair, I was just a little like duck out of water. I was a little kind of not grounded in exactly my role in the process. I didn't have a system. And when I went to this consultant, I'll tell you what, it really changed my world. And frankly, it launched my career, because I ended up recruiting 46 agents to a 50-50 split at the time at Long & Foster. I took the office from 20 agents to over 100, and from a loss to over $1 million in profit in a very short window of time. And then that launched me to run real estate companies for NRT. So then I ran operations for NRT. NRT is the Anywhere Company Store, Anywhere Advisors now, and it's under the Coldwell Banker brand. And I ran the Baltimore company. I took over the Mid-Atlantic, and then I oversaw Georgia through Delaware. At the end, it was a 4,000 agent operation. We did about $10 billion in sales. We had a resort rental division of 3,000 properties on the coast. We had property management, commercial brokerage, mortgage, title, warranty, and insurance. So I did that for a decade, had a lot of fun, learned a lot, worked with some amazing people. And then 6 years, I'm going into my 7th year here on February 19th. With T360. So I worked with Stefan, met with Stefan Swanpool and Jack Miller, our CEO, president. And I came over to run our brokerage and team consulting division. And one of the great things for me, and this is the same thing that you're in your spot, Mark, you can actually, I see so many different models, P&L, profit loss documents. I see operations and best practices. And that's something that really becomes of great advantage to your clients, to my clients, because we can give not only our personal experiences and what helped us drive us to be so successful, we also can give insight from common today practical advice on what's working in today's space, and really help people to move from here to whatever level of success they look to go to.
Oh, that's awesome. We have a lot of common background and that's why I think we get along so well. We've done a lot of the same things, and we love, you know, working with the clients that are joining us today on really helping them move to the next level.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us. I know you're a wealth of knowledge, and I think we're going to have a great session today. I wanted to start with a couple things. You know, Ben Hess and I were talking about the theme for the year. And one of it was 2024, build back stronger, build back stronger. And when you think about it, that's really where we're at, is building back stronger each and every day. I always make fun of folks. Hey, you're looking for a sign? You know, like you were a strong listing agent, like I was at one day. I'm always looking for a sign. And there's a couple key signs we've seen. My good friend Michael Simonson, who I'm very close with over at Altos, recently published, you know, inventory for sale is 6% more than last year, 9% more new listings this week as of Monday versus the same week last year. 13% more contracts starting out the first week of January. And Mike was telling me the sales rate is improving, and they're projecting a 15% growth in home sales this year. This is really good news for all of us. I've got some links later for people to look at for their local markets, but any comments on this?
Yeah, I love it. So on Altos, I love Altos and the research, and it comes out, I think it's weekly, right? It comes out
every Monday. Yeah, every Monday it's updated. Yeah.
It's awesome. Really good statistics. I watched this as well, and you and I talked briefly right before we came on here. And yeah, and seeing the actual graphs and the numbers. I mean, these are real numbers. And I'm a numbers guy, as I mentioned earlier in my little bio. But this is one of the things that it's really two things I take from this. One is this is great. It seems like we bottomed out. If I speak from a 1,000-foot level. So bottomed out in 2023, 2024. Looks like we're coming out. It's not that we're going to be shooting up like, like 2020, like a COVID year where we took off, but we're coming out of the basement, it looks like, and we're moving our way slowly up the stairs to a more robust market as toward number of units, as an example. The price looks to be, I think we're still challenged on inventory, as we know. That said, the second item that I throw out to everybody is, this is like the time. Most people, when markets are often challenged, as you know, Mark, they're hesitant to do things. They're frozen, kind of like, hey, let's just kind of wait this out.
Yeah.
And
paralyzed.
one of the things,
get paralyzed, right?
Paralyzed. And one of the things I always encourage clients to do, and work, you have to really think through this, strategize, and then roll things out. Of course, you just don't throw things in against the wall and see what sticks. But these are the times to change things. If you wanted to increase something like a fee or add something or things like that, and all fees are negotiable, things like that. I'm not getting into the nuts and bolts on things, but if you're going to make a change, do it when it's rough, when it's challenging, because people will understand. And when we come out of this, which we're starting to come out of the basement, as I mentioned, you're going to be in a better place through 2024, 2025, 2026. If you try to, if you try to change things and everything's great and everyone's selling, everything's happy, and you try to then increase or do something, they're going to be throwing things at you. They're not going to take it well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've got a PDF. If you'd like a copy of this PDF afterwards, just put PDF in the comment bars and I'll send this to you. These three links here: National, California, Texas, Florida, New York. And then if you're listening in, you can type in on that link your local city or zip code. But these are some of the national stats that you'll see on the PDF. Still showing a fairly slightly seller's advantage, primarily because of the inventory. But what I like about the Altos is the trending. You can see the trend each week, and we're seeing a pretty good increase in inventory pretty much all across the country. Well, let's stop for a minute and do a quick poll for the audience. I'm going to do, as you know, those of you that have participated, I like to do some polls and get people engaged. Let's kind of see where our audience is, Dean, and kind of what the roles are. Suites, founders, broker owners, recruiters. We get a really engaged audience each time.
Love it.
And then right after this, we'll do the number of years of experience. So we got some pretty good participation here. We got regional management, we got recruiters, we got broker owners, we got founder owners, and C-suite executives, and some support staff. So we got a pretty broad audience. I think we've got everybody that we're Can you see the results there, everyone? So this is kind of our audience role today. So we have a great breadth of audience. Let's do real quick years of experience. This is one of my fun ones because we always get a great breadth of experience as well. So less than a year, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, 20 or more. Look at that. We have 20 or more. So Dean, these are our people.
We've got survivors.
We got survivors. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, over 50% of our audience. Yeah.
Wow.
Over 50% of our audience is, 20 or more years. So there's a lot of experience sitting in this room. And I think they're going to ask us some tough questions, which will be good. So throughout this, pop your questions into the chat bar. We'll be monitoring those, and Dean and I will address those as we go. Got a couple more polls to go throughout as we get through that. But let's do one other before we get into it. Let's do their transaction outlook for 2024. Let's just see how that's feeling for folks. On the transaction outlook, are you feeling better, worse, or about the same? And so far, pretty predominantly better.
We got optimistic, positive people. Yes, this is good.
And about the same. We don't have anybody that's we don't have too many that are worse. So that's let's look at this real quick. So, mostly better.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. Ties to the numbers that we shared earlier.
Yeah. So let me stop sharing that. So Dean, I got a couple questions for you just to do a kickoff. And there's the lawsuits and its implications. There's the NAR leadership and lack of understanding of many agents. And in some cases, leaders, the role of NAR, market conditions, how are you in T360 advising your clients? I got lots of questions for you. So I hope you're ready, man.
Ready.
Let's talk about the loss. Let's talk about the lawsuits and implications and how you're advising your clients to deal with these.
Well, and one thing that'd be helpful, I think, to those in the audience that don't know, I got into my bio, but T360 real quick. We have multiple divisions. So we're like the McKinsey, Boston consulting organizations, but we're only within the white picket fence. So we have 7 different divisions that include all kinds like T3 talent. We place 70 management to C-level executives in the talent space as an example. I run brokerage and team with my team. We have technology. And we're really known as publications. That's where we started on the publications, where we write the trends report every year. It comes out in December, T3 Trends. If you haven't seen that or not aware of it, I encourage you to take a look at it. We spend about 1,000 hours and we do a deep dive on the biggest trends affecting our business. I'll give you an example, going to the lawsuits. The lawsuits we wrote about, not December of 23, but December of 2022, we wrote, it was our #1 chapter. We actually start like 10 or 9 chapters typically per year, and we work up to what we think is the biggest trend that's going to impact our business. In December of 2022, it was our #1 chapter. One of the pictures in there was an iceberg floating, and it's not to create a fear factor. It's like, be aware of this, see these things coming and things like that. So, and one of the things, as I give the breadth of T360, we have a sister company that we brought on over a year ago now called realestatenews.com. Our founder, Stefan Swanpool, over 20 years ago, bought the real estate domain realestatenews.com. And we've launched a news company that is basically, it's not the TMZ like we see in a lot of news agencies within our space. It's actually more like the Wall Street Journal. It's like high-level insight into what's taking place. And as an example, in the Sitzer-Burnett case, the one that really got everyone's attention, that came out with a $1.7 billion settlement from the jury, and they were out for 2 hours and 15 minutes or something like that, not very long, and came back very quick with that. We had, there was no cameras in there, you couldn't have anything like that in the courtroom. So we actually had a reporter in the courtroom. So we actually had a reporter who was coming out and updating us on everything that was taking place and the testimony and things like that. So as toward the lawsuits, we're doing a lot of work in this space. We're doing assessments on organizations Are they prepared for it? You know, a lot of people, their old policy manuals, they have independent contractors agreements, they have buyer broker agreements, they have all these things that they're just really need to hone in and get in tune with. And so we're doing a ton of assessments where we do that deep dive in multiple areas. And then we do a virtual talk with their agents to help wrap their mind around the fact that these lawsuits are taking place. And my point I'm trying to get to is these lawsuits started in 2019. The
Right.
Sitzer-Burnett was filed in 2019. And as you look chronologically, I mean, we're in 2024 now, right? So there was the MLS PIN settlement that took place earlier in 2023. The wild card is the Department of Justice and what they're going to ultimately look to see as they actually stepped into the settlement agreement that was agreed on, that MLS PIN settlement, and said it's not enough. They literally went from, hey, with the NAR policy on compensation and MLSs that you have to have a penny or a dollar as a minimum, a lot of organizations, a lot of MLSs have gone to zero being something that is acceptable, things along those lines. And that's what the MLS PIN did. They came to that settlement agreement. It was a $3 million settlement agreement, and said, okay, we'll go to zero. We'll allow zero to be an acceptable field or number in that field for compensation being offered. And Department of Justice said that's not far enough. That's not enough. And so, and then we get some real insight when we fast forward a couple more months to the Sitzer-Burnett case. And prior to the jury and them going through the trial, we had RE/MAX first step in and doing a settlement at $55 million. And then you had Anywhere at $83.5 million settlement. And what's really great about that, you get some insight into what the plaintiffs, the attorneys, what they agree to with Anywhere, with RE/MAX, because in those settlement agreements, which had been passed on and the judges okayed, and they're moving on, and we'll know, I think in March, as we'll look to hopefully see those finalized. Again, the Department of Justice might step in. At this point, they have not. And there's a layout of every single item in there. There's like 7 points, I believe, 7 or 8 points specifically in there. A lot of them we're all familiar with. The two that stood out was there's no longer a minimum commission. They're not going to require their Anywhere advisor organizations. This isn't their franchises. It was the Anywhere advisors that they can't, there's no minimum compensation. There's no minimum in there that they're going to enforce. And they don't have to be members of NAR anymore. So that was 2 of the 7 or 8 points that came out of that settlement.
And the third one, Dean, that stood out to me, and I wrote a blog on this that I'll include with the PDF. The third one that stood out to me was no technology that would allow listings to be sorted by compensation offers. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and that actually,
I just did a poll on kind of where the audience, it looks like they're split. Some are positive, some are negative, some are neutral, some are something else. How are you advising broker owners and those people listening in to navigate through all the ambiguity? We're all leaders listening in, and we want to move forward, and we want to provide direction and leadership and positive momentum. How are you and your team advising folks to stay in action?
So this is every state. There's like 14 states in the union in the US that are they default to transaction-based agency, and then typically maybe single agency in addition to that. And there's every state's uniquely is different in how they handle agency. And there seems to be, in my opinion, back in the 90s when buyer agencies started coming on, that's where people states went either transactional default, or we're going to go designated agency, buyer agent, seller, so on and so forth. So it seemed like there was a split back then. But in consulting with our clients, what we're saying to broker owners is the fact of control what you can control, and then prepare your organization so you win today. And we'll win tomorrow as well, no matter what happens. So knowing that we're sitting in a crossroads right now, we don't know how this is all going to play out. We mentioned this earlier, don't sit on your hands. Let's proactively make sure everything's in line with your current statutes in your law, but also that you wrap the mind around and you start training, you start honing in your buyer presentation. As an example, we're so good, and we talked about you and I being very strong listing agents. We're so good at going out and sitting down with the seller and explaining the value that we bring to the table and them agreeing to pay us. X whatever, so many
Right.
bananas or apples, and we have a little fun with that, not commission, but whatever. On the buy side, a lot of organizations that we're working with do not have a buyer presentation and do not have like inline, here are the recommendations of best practices of how to sit down and convey value to a buyer to move them into, depending on the state and the law and things like that, in the situation of that broker.
Here are the services
What
we provide and at what
Yeah.
fees, right?
Yeah, and that's create an awareness to the agents and then create a level of, and this, and the same as leadership and recruiting, but also in agents in business, let's raise the bar on confidence, on how confident someone is to sit down with a buyer and say, here's what I provide, and here's how I support you, and here's my fee.
Right. And so that's something we can do today. I like how you said it. What I heard you say is do what you can to win today, and we'll
Yep.
figure out how we win tomorrow, because it's so ambiguous. We got to win the day.
That's right. Exactly right.
So let me pivot then, and then I want to get into some other specific recruiting and talent attraction. But this also relates to NAR leadership, and there seems to be, I follow all the agent Facebook groups, and you can see the lack of understanding of what NAR's role is and isn't.
Yeah.
And even the role of the MLS. What are you kind of helping people work through that issue?
NAR's been so challenged here, especially in their leadership and things like that. And it's been an organization, frankly, it's something that, hindsight being 2020, an organization that size, we've spent some, within T360, we issued a white paper back in the middle of last year, I think, with recommendations to NAR and MLSs and things like that. So we really took a stand on this, and to really be in a position of leadership and leading this. And they have not stepped forward up into, we're helping and we're giving that insight, that direction, and how to potentially look at some other large associations across the US as an example, and what are some examples you could take from them to be in a better position with leaders. For example, I mean, so I don't want to get down too many rabbit holes on.
Well, one thing that came to mind for me is I learned it in the military is if you want to bitch and moan, either be part of the solution or stop bitching and moaning. Either volunteer and step up and be a leader and help move it in the direction you'd like it to be, and get involved. You can get involved at the local level, the regional level, the state, national level. I think the answer that I'm telling people is let's get involved.
Yeah.
And lead. And we can change, we can be the change we want to see, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I was president of my local board. I was involved. I was on the state board, the national board. I'm familiar with that. I did that run, president-elect, so on and so forth, and worked it up, and from the inside, had a view from the inside as that goes and things like that. So, but I agree, you gotta step up. And there are a lot of different things and we have a recommendation that we've put out publicly to NAR as toward how to best move this forward. One of the things about NAR, we also say the National Association of Realtors, one of the benefits is, and one of the things that would be very helpful to us, is the lobby, is the power of the lobby.
Oh, for sure.
That is the, especially with the mortgage situation and commissions and negotiating, potentially if you're going to have to add it as a closing cost credit or things like that. So that's something that's a piece of this equation. And also with NAR is also if there's a settlement. I know they're adamant on fighting the lawsuit and appealing and going down that path. As we know, there's additional copycat lawsuits. I think there's 17 that are currently outstanding throughout the US. Is the last count that we had. I think this was as of yesterday. That could change later today. So with that, there's also some benefits with NAR with the potential settlement.
For sure. Well, let's transition to talent attraction, recruiting, and retention. And I want to come back to what maybe recruits are looking for, or existing folks. But I always like to ask my guests the difference. Do you see a difference between talent attraction and recruiting, or do you view them as one and the same?
I see them differently. I see attraction, when I think about attraction, I think about, and I kind of have some, I'm thinking, and I hope this comes across okay. But I'm thinking like, think about you in life, right? Are you working as a human being to be someone who's positive, who's optimistic, who's approachable, people like, a good person, things like that? Are you attractive? Do you work out? Do you stay in shape? Do you eat healthy? Things like that. And we all don't. I just had a cinnamon roll earlier, things like that. So, every once in a while you can cheat. But that said, as an organization, now let's take this from that comment and that analogy and then move it over to a real estate operation. How attractive are you to a prospect on the outside, whether they're new and they're thinking about getting into this business, whether they're experienced, whatever level of experience? I always say a life cycle of an agent, new, and I kind of do a life cycle piece. But also you can take that attractiveness and, not for the purpose of this call, but take it to a buyer and seller. As a consumer, would I want to work with this company? And that ties into philanthropic work and stuff like that. So it all ties together. So the attractiveness to me is, are you out there? What's the culture? Culture is so powerful. It's one thing hard to put your finger on it, right? But the culture of that organization is so important. The systems, the efficiencies, how effective are they? And not only the business they run, but how do they amplify those messages to their market, to agents in their market, to their current agents, which we know is re-recruiting.
Yeah.
Retention is recruiting your current agents.
Dean, I like to think about it as a magnet, right? The attraction is the magnet, right? Is it attracting? Is it something that people want to be part of? Ben writes in our Recruiting Insight blog along perception of fit. Do they feel like this is like a home? Where recruiting to me is more kind of like, I don't want to call it the hard sell, but more of you're selling someone into something versus attracting them into it. That, to me, that's the difference.
Yeah, and I use the magnet analogy as well, because I like the magnet analogy in that, the magnet, as we all know, it attracts. And when I was working with, in part of my role when I ran that East Coast for NRT was finding talent that would run sales offices and for regionals and local operating presidents. So you're constantly looking for talent. But that was the biggest thing. Are they a magnet? Are they attracting great talent and great people? And you also want to be, as a magnet does, repel certain things. I repel that. I don't. So part of that magnetism is like, I want to. So because everybody attracts, and that's actually one of the biggest things I put out as I go like this. It's the X factor. The biggest X factor that I see in organizations, and it ties to the magnetism of that organization, is the leader or the leadership, depending on the size of that and the scale of that business. And the X factor is that quality of that leader who's there, who is magnetizing, either repelling people because they're not the right magnet, they're not the right person, or they're attracting a lot more people than they're repelling.
I love it. What do you think experienced agents, and it's probably different than new agents, what are agents looking for in a leader today? What in leadership and culture? What's the type of environment you think that folks are looking for today? Is it more collaborative? Is it more transparent?
Both those, transparent, collaborative, but also what I have found is real leaders won't have an issue with challenging the top agents on improving their business or seeing flaws or seeing challenges or friction points in their business that maybe they don't see, or maybe they see and they just ignore it. And being able to approach that team, that agent, that leader, and being able to have that conversation in a proactive way that actually, in other words, you're not coming across like, I'm insecure and I'm going to put you down to make me feel better, which is not going to work in any context, no matter what it is. I'm approaching you because I want to help. And I'm seeing something I think that is being detrimental to helping you in your business. And this is what it is. And I'll give you an example. And I know commissions are negotiable. One of the things I encourage leaders to do is really evaluate your buy-side commission percentage average and your list-side commission percentage average. And depending on the scale of the business, dive that into your agents. If it's offices, and then agents. And I had some top leaders that would approach top agents and challenge them. They have new agents taking higher commission percentages on business than these very experienced, very knowledgeable professionals. And they challenged them on. I mean, I tell you, not everybody took it well. They didn't like the fact that they were being challenged, because who are you to challenge me? Long story short, what we know is they come back, and this is a great story. One of them came back a year. They didn't leave. They came back a year later and they thanked the leader that challenged her because she made $30,000 more from that conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's where you create those ties where people don't leave you.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because you and I know, and people listening in can relate to this. Many times as leaders, we avoid those what I call carefrontations.
Yeah.
The caring, not a confrontation, but a caring a conversation, because we care.
Yeah, good way to put it.
But we avoid those sometimes because we're afraid, well, gosh, what if they leave?
Mm-hmm.
And so then we
This
get
is one of-
paralyzed and we do nothing.
Yeah. And I kind of flash back what helped me, and I would encourage everyone watching this to think back in your life where you had that 4-letter word that is fear. That fear has stopped you, and really bring that up. I remember having a conversation with Bruce Ziff years ago in 2009, and we went from 90 offices to 37 offices in around the Mid-Atlantic. It was a very painful, challenging time of redirecting talent and figuring things out and closing things. And I was so fearful. I had 2 offices I rolled together. I lost a lot of agents, and it's just like, wow, I just got hit in the gut, not once, but like 20 times by someone who was very strong. It was like, oh my gosh, these were gut punches. And I was hesitant. And then I literally left, like went up in the air and was looking down at myself saying, why are you being such a wimp, Dean? What are you afraid of? Pick the flag up, stand up, and go out and do this. So it's all about pushing through these fears. Catch yourself. One of the things that we say is, think of a scale of 1 to 10, and where are you on that scale in recruiting effectiveness, for example? Now, I could say from an outside perspective, I think you're this or that, but really, I don't want to tell you that. I want you to tell yourself that, because listen to you. You're not going to listen to me as much. So you think, you know what, I'm at an 8, I'm at a 7, I'm at a 4. Well, what's going to take you to get to a 9? And there's no 10s. You'll never be a 10. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And so in that improvement, what's going to help you? But don't let fear stop you from doing what's right. And that ties into the coaching of experienced agents that we just talked about. It also ties into recruiting. I used to find so much benefit, Mark, in contacting top agents and top teams. And I'll tell you one other thing before this call ends. There's such a space for acquisitions for all. Small, mid-sized companies, they want that phone to ring. They want somebody to come in and give them a lifeline, because they're right now having a real tough challenge. And so I encourage everybody, pick up the phone, go meet with people, go have lunch, go break bread. That's an important piece in all this.
Yeah, I like that. Well, one thing I'd like you to comment on, and I learned this the hard way. I was a senior leader in one of the top 5 brokerages in America a number of years past. And we thought we had to bring an idea because one of the competitors that we were up against had downlines. And we thought, well, we'll just add a downline and that'll solve all of our problems. Well, it didn't. It didn't, because it wasn't part of our culture. It wasn't part of something. We tried to be something we weren't.
Right.
And it didn't work. So I'm wondering if you have a comment on how the people listening in get really clear on what their niche is, what their ideal agent is, and what their value prop, and be who you are, not trying to be some hybrid thing that you bolt on. Any comments?
Yeah, because it's like, here comes a shiny penny. It's that shiny penny syndrome. Someone's got this thing and like a downline, and then we run in and we do that downline because I think that'll scratch that itch. And then somebody else has got this, somebody else that. There's a couple exercises that we go through our fellows program, that MBA style program for leaders. And literally, we start off in the first 3 areas that we work on are foundational. The first is fully doing an audit of their business. We audit the business from A to Z, front to back, everything, financials, you name it, everything that's going on, tech stack. We do the org chart review. We do a marketing overview, everything, because that's where you create that foundational understanding of who you are, where you are, and what's some low-hanging fruit that you could do like a 2-degree change or a 4-degree change and make an impact to your bottom line like that. And then we go into an exercise. We talk about, this ties to your question, ties to, all right, what's your future destination? So many of us in our space, you think about Wall Street, for example, and this use technology as an example. If I'm taking a technology company and I'm getting private equity, or I'm going to go public, I've got a plan that says I'm entering the market, I'm going to do this, and then I'm getting out. What that out strategy looks like. And I've got that whole horizon, that time horizon. There's so many of us in our business that don't have that. We're doing the day-to-day,
Right.
changing the light bulbs, we're plunging the commodes, we're doing the deals, we're doing everything, right? We feel like we're just over them. I always say the water level's like here. Part of that problem is the water level is so high because you haven't gone about understanding coolly where you are right now. To your point, what are the strengths? What are the areas? What's your value? And then what is the destination? What's your path? What's your roadmap? And then the last one of those 3 modules in foundational work is, and this ties to the understanding your value prop, a really deep dive SWOT analysis on your competitors. And then what happens is,
I don't think enough of us do SWOT analysis, the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our competition. And, one of the things of how we're different, a lot of people say, well, Mark, how are you guys different than T360? My analogy is you guys are the MBA. You go to T360 to get the full on consulting experience, the MBA, where what Ben and I have created is the curriculum on recruiting and retention and talent attraction, the 101, 201, 301. We're like one of the courses inside the MBA.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something, and there's enough business. So we know there's enough out there where and you're specialized, you're right there. That's something that we have, Mark just shared with everybody.
Yeah. Well, let's I've got a couple more questions, but let's open it up also to the audience.
Okay.
I know one of the questions we have is we have some people coming in late and they missed part of the recording, and they're asking, are they going to get the recording? Yes, everyone who's registered, if you're listening in now, or if you had an issue come up, you're going to get the recording and our notes in the PDF. So yes, that's going to happen. But pop into the chat bar or the question. Any questions you may have, you got both of us here for that. But if I was the CEO of one of these firms right now asking you, Dean, give me a couple nuggets for 2024. What would your coaching advice, consulting be as we head into the next couple of weeks?
One of the things, it's like that question it's a loaded question, as you and I know, because it's like, if I close my eyes.
I'm good at that, by the way,
If I close my eyes or turn the lights off, close my eyes and threw darts straight at the bullseye over there, I don't know enough about it. So one of the things that we talk about is you really got to get in tune with your organization and understanding exactly what soup to nuts, what is going on. And then also, where do you want to go? Because so many people, and I'll just do a real quick aside. Stefan, our founder, he was the national chess champion in South Africa as a teenager. Yes. He's this guy is a strategic thinker. So when you think about you're right here, all right, where are you? Do you know for sure you're right here? Benchmark it, best practices. And then when you think about, to your point, where do you want to go? And what should be the recommendations 24? Well, recruiting is number one. It is the fastest way to change your bottom line, period. End of story, right? But that said, there's a lot of components that tie into that of understanding your wealth, not your wealth, but your worth and who you are in the marketplace. And frankly, your confidence level. One of the great things about that first module for us, and we do that as a standalone because it's a deep audit, and people really love the fact of getting that insight and benchmark and best practices on their company dollar retain percentage. There are all these different things that we benchmark. Sometimes it just confirms they're on the right path. Just run faster. All right. You're doing the right thing. And sometimes we're like, hey, you're 60 degrees off. You're really missing the mark here. And really that energy is wasted. Bring it back this way. So that's,
I'm glad you mentioned that 1 degree off. I don't remember the total math, but if an airplane takes off from New York City flying to Orange County, California, and they're 1 degree off on their path, you end up at LAX, which is 50 miles north, right? That's so that 1 degree difference in the first couple miles doesn't matter. But over the course of a year, now that 1 degree is exponential. So being just 1 or 2% off right now doesn't show up, but a year from now, that's where you get this gap. So I'm doing a poll here. Let's look at this poll.
Okay.
Let's share it. Because I think there's a couple questions around this. This was the biggest challenge that the audience is facing right now. And it looks like number one is talent attraction and recruiting, followed by profitability. And you and I are both organizations are uniquely qualified in both of those areas, right? And then followed by retention. So
Right.
I don't think there's any surprise here. Talent attraction, recruiting, profitability, retention. I call it R3. Revenue, retention, and recruitment. Any surprises here?
None. And it goes right to your question about attractiveness, attraction, and recruiting. And that's, how attractive are you, and how do you become more attractive as an organization? And we've really hit on a lot of those things, because recruiting comes, the idea is if you don't have a great house, a lot of people are not going to come over. They're not going to work with you. So that's something to really look at. What do you have? What have you built? And one of the things too, I'll share with you really, it's, if I look back, and I shared this in the beginning, those that were on in the beginning, is, working with that consultant at Long and Foster for me, forever ago, just propelled me in my career. And one of the things we say to clients is, you know what, it's a matter of time. Everyone on this call is very smart. You're going to figure this out. It just might take you a lot longer. And you're going to spend more time and energy and frustration working through a process, or you could work with somebody who's been down this path, who's done these things, and who can give you shortcuts, and not in a bad way, but they're going to give you shortcuts that are powerful and help you take you there much faster.
Well, I'd like to comment on a couple things, then we have a few questions. One for talent attraction, and I'm going to ask Ben maybe to do a blog on this. At Recruiting Insight, we have at least 15 different pieces of content that can be used for various types of classes for your own retention of your own agents, but also where you can invite agents in to participate. For example, we have the art and science of goal setting. We have to team or not to team and the best practices of whether that works or not. We have a quarterly business review for new agents and experienced agents that we would love to share with anybody. Just share it in the chat bar and we'll share these with you. We have lots of content that is used for attraction. And to me, attraction is bringing people into your culture so they can experience what it's like to be there and meet your people and be part of your processes. And obviously you can't invite everyone in the marketplace, but you can invite a few of those who are your positive magnets that you want to attract, right?
Right. Exactly right. Yep.
So a couple questions. Ben asks, Inman just reported recently that 50% of agents in the industry closed 1 to 0 transactions last year.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking that, hiring managers need to be more selective?
My response to that is, because I've had so many leaders I've worked with who use that as a way to not recruit people. So I'd rather see people. So my take on that is, I use an analogy of a treadmill. All right. And your treadmill depends on your organization. Like you might be running a 12-minute mile, which is your walking, right? And that's fine. It's all good. And then you've got other organizations, they might be running a 6-minute or 8-minute mile. I mean, they're moving, they're doing well. So bring people in, because this is the thing. It's like BD or BM. All right. They produced one transaction before Dean or before Mark or before whatever, put your name there, right? So they haven't worked with you or your organization. So they were lost. I said, these individual agents, they're lost. They were sold a bill of goods at some other organization around you. Bring them over to you, put them through your system. And then if they don't succeed, if they fall off that treadmill, you get rid of them. So to me, then the recruiter I'm working with and the leader I'm working with, there shouldn't be any friction points on bringing people in. Unless they have 3 heads and they're spitting fire and they're throwing hand grenades, then you don't bring them in. All right. Other than that, you bring them in, put them on there, put them the mentor if they're new, put them with, we used to call it's not a mentor program. We had office buddies. So an experienced agent came in. I wanted to keep me focused on recruiting, and this is the encouragement, right? And so if you're recruiting 4, 5, 6 people a month, you're going to get pulled into some of that unless you have systems in place to support that. So I ended up having like 8 mentors when I was running that Long and Foster office. I had office buddies who took the experienced agents and helped them get into the systems and do all these things.
Right.
So you want to create systems and people and places to support you while you stay focused on that number one area, which is recruiting.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the BM or BD, or I use BG. What did we do before Google? BG before Google. So James asked, and I'm biased in this regard, so I'll do one plug for Third Pool. But James asked, what's the best platform to get new agent talent? And if you haven't heard about our Third Pool solution, we'd love to schedule a consult with you, James, on that. But Dean, obviously you see all the different platforms, and is there a magic formula for new agent talent?
Well, it's consistency, right? Because as we know, that's lack of consistency doesn't bring us anything. And Third Pool is one
Consistency is undefeated, right?
Yeah.
Consistency is undefeated. Yeah.
So, be consistent. Third Pool is sometimes you get inundated. You can't continue to do some outreach. So you want to look at third-party support like Third Pool. I think Third Pool does a great job and bringing business and bringing that new agent person and do the funnel. I think that's really beneficial. And new agents, I was big in career events, career nights, things like that. The challenge with some people is they put dates and times. I wouldn't do that. I always had people reach out to me and said, hey, when's the next one? I used to have I would say mark off time, do them Zoom right these days. But I'm on Tuesday at 10, Thursdays at 3, and Wednesdays at 6. So you can have people come in person or come virtually. You've marked off the time in your calendar. And I always said to them, and I was encourage you, it could be one-on-one. It could be 15 people in the Zoom room or in person. I don't know. Come on in. So you just want to do full court press on recruiting, both new and experienced, bring people through, put them on that treadmill, and let people fall off. And the great news about that, and people say, hey, I want to hold on to my talented agents, and they're going to get upset if I bring in agents that are not going to measure up. I can tell you this, they're going to leave you if you don't recruit people. So you've got to bring people in and see that like you're the place to be. And when you bring them in, the key is you got to get rid of them. If they're not active, if they're not doing the right things and they're not proactive and they're not staying up to your minimums, remove them, move them off. And that'll be the best way for you to retain your talent, increase productivity, and recruit great talent.
Yeah, Chris has two different questions. One's going to be a little harder to answer. I've got a few opinions, but his first question is, what shiny objects will be most prevalent in 2024, tempting us to change, our stripes to accommodate? Dean, any thoughts on that?
Shiny objects. That's the problem. Quit looking at the shiny objects.
Right.
And go back. It's everything we've talked about. I think that's, you want to be seen as, of course, the leader and the organization that is not old or stodgy or old school or things like that. So that part of that question, I would take it that direction. You want to make sure you're cutting edge. I remember when iPads came out, I got iPads for all my managers, half of them probably didn't use them. But I was like, you know what, you got to use the iPads or this, we're going to stay up. I've got a remarkable 2 device I use now. I mean, things like that. You want to be up with technology, hey, remember, perception is reality. When people perceive things, that is real to them. And so you've got to make sure you cross those T's.
Yeah, and one of the things I did in pretty much every organization I've been part of is have a filter, a decision filter. We're clear on what our niche is, who our ideal agent is, and what our value proposition is. Yeah. And then we have our core values, and anything that comes in has to go through that filter. And if it doesn't align with our core values and our value prop and our ideal agent, it's like, put it in the parking lot. Yeah. Chris also asked, please explain the difference between the brand's role, and I'm assuming he's maybe part of a brand, in talent attraction versus the manager role in recruiting. I've got 2 comments on that, and then Dean, I'll turn it over to you. I think the brand and the manager both have a role in talent attraction. More or less, the brand and the local manager have to work in tandem, in my opinion, to offer events throughout the year. One of the best practices Dean and I did, I would do a theme for the year. Every quarter without fail, I would do a business review for my existing agents, and I would invite outside agents every 90 days, like clockwork. That was part of our theme. Then in between those 90 days, both the brand and the managers would lead sessions on time management, goal setting, whatever. Dean, do you have thoughts on that? The brand's role and the manager's role in talent attraction?
I like what you just said. What we pay attention to expands in our worlds. So when you pay attention to quarterly business, the sense and the perception of your company becomes about business and business focused and the things that it takes to do top of funnel stuff. We look at brands, it's like another tool, right? It's a tool in your toolbox. So some organizations stay independent. They decide they don't want that brand, or any brand really maybe doesn't fit, or they might think they're unique in how they approach things, and they don't want anything that's currently on the shelf. I say on the shelf, and bring on a brand. But both tied, the brand does create benefits. Some brands more than others, depending on the market, depending on the leader and the right fits, right? Because they bring together whatever that brand is in the form of, are they a gesture brand? We get into the whole archetype discussion on brands and dive deep into that. And because so many people within are like a little schizophrenic, where they dive, like one day I'm a gesture brand, I'm being funny like a Geico or Liberty Mutual. The next day I'm going to be, I'm going to be a Sage brand like a Wall Street Journal. Then I'm going to be, blah, blah, blah. They're kind of all over the place. And then what happens is those mixed messages don't resonate with your agents, with agents in the market, with consumers in the market. So one of the nice things about brands, to get back to this question, is brands are really consistent. They've done this work. They've done the archetype. They know their lane. They stay in their lane, and they run down that road. So that becomes helpful. One of the things you just got to be careful of if you're underneath a brand is that you don't diverge and you're not completely like all over the place. We do actually, typically you have a primary brand and a secondary brand. So having two is fine, as long as you're not jumping around to 3, 4, and 5.
It comes back to the SWOT analysis, right? Really understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and being. Well, I know you have a hard stop coming up, and we promised that we would keep this to less than 60 minutes. I think we're providing a lot of value to the audience. Give us a yes in the chat bar if you're getting some value from this. As we wrap up, we'll take any last minute questions, but for those listening in, at Recruiting Insight, many of you may know what we offer. Some of you may not know that we recently acquired a outbound call center called Talent Scout, but we offer sourcing, selection, and assessment for the audience that's listening in here, and we do it very, very well. Our third pool product has been around for 17 years, primarily focused on new agents. Our co-recruit product for coaching and making experienced agent a signature strength of your brokerage. And then our Talent Scout product, which actually does the heavy lifting of the outbound calls for you. All of those are available. If you're interested and want to talk about any of those products, we'd love to have a conversation with you over the next few weeks. Dean, what about T360? How do they get a hold of you, and if they'd like to talk further about any of the products that you all have?
Great, Mark. Thank you again for the opportunity to be on the call. I would say it really depends on your time horizon and the people that are on here. If you want something like 60 days, a real quick fix and understanding of your business from soup to nuts, is that annual business review exercise that we do. It's a full audit of your business. And if you're looking to get more like an MBA, or you have somebody in your leadership team, or have leadership teams that you want to actually go through a process from A to Z, we actually dive into key areas through our fellows program. You can find all this on our T360.com website. So the letter T, the number 3, the word 60. You can also do T360 and number numerically .com. And you'll see brokerage and team first in drop-down menu. You'll see the fellows program. That's the MBA style program, and the annual business review, which is our real quick 30 to 60 day exercise where we do the audit. A piece of that, I'll just share, last piece here, is with the annual business review, a lot of people tap into the strategic intent exercise, which is creating that roadmap to get where you want to go and have that end state vision, and what are the projects right in front of you to help you get there. So that's where I would direct you. My email is dean@t360.com. You can just feel free to email me, and then we can schedule time. It's be a complimentary 25 minutes just on behalf of Mark and having me on this call. I'll do a complimentary for anybody who wants to spend some time, talk more about your personal business and how we might be of help to you.
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this first Mastermind of 2024. Appreciate everyone. Someone typed in the chat bar was the best use of their lunch hour in quite a while. So that's good.
Good, Mark, thank you again for having me.
You're welcome, and hope to have you back. And with everyone else, as you move forward, we hope that your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. Take care, and we'll talk soon.